Self-doubt shows up somewhere between mile 20 and mile 80. It doesn't knock. It doesn't ask permission. It just slips into your head when your legs are heavy, your stomach turns, and the trail ahead feels endless. And here's the truth. Every ultra runner knows that voice. It's the voice that says, you're not ready. You trained wrong. You don't belong out here. But self-doubt isn't the enemy. It's a test. Because the difference between finishing and quitting is not your VO2 max, your gear, or your pace. It's your response to that voice. You don't silence self-doubt by pretending it's not there. You answer it. When it says you can't, you respond with evidence. You remember the early mornings, the long runs in the rain, the days you don't want to train but did anyways. You remember yourself. I've always done hard things. In ultra running, the body follows the mind far longer than we expect. Your legs will negotiate. Your lungs will complain. But your mind decides. So when doubt creeps in at mile 50, don't panic. That's exactly where it's supposed to show up. That's the area. That's the moment you signed up for. Break it down. 1 mile, 1 aid station, 1 step. You don't need to conquer the whole race. You just need to keep moving forward. Because self-doubt doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're pushing your limits. And limits are where growth lives. Every ultra finisher has made a quiet decision somewhere deep in the race. I don't need to feel strong. I just need to keep going. So when that voice comes back, and it will, let it talk. Then pass it, keep moving, and finish the race. Thanks for tuning in. I'm your host and coach, Josh. Today we're going to be talking about creatine. I don't know if you've been taking creatine or not. Usually it's recommended 5 grams, maybe per day. And then if you do more than that, let's say 20 grams, then it bypasses the muscles and goes to the brain. And can enhance your cognitive performance, enhance the brain, especially if you're tired. So it's definitely something to consider if you're looking for some help along the way with the ultra running. But you got to be very careful with creatine because it can affect the liver. So you definitely want to talk to your doctor and make sure that your liver is healthy. Also, you don't want to overdo it on the trail because you're already going to give your liver a lot of stress. And then if you're adding creatine to it, it's just going to make it that much more stressful. So always contact your physician and go from there for sure. Yesterday ran 31 miles, which 50K, and it was good. It was a PR, a little hurtful, but nothing that was too bad. Not too much swelling in the feet. Did the routine to I guess rest the feet. But in the morning, the feet were really, or the Achilles was really bad. Couldn't really walk that good. But done some red light therapy on it, and then put some icy hot on it, and then did a Achilles workout, which surprisingly helped it a lot. I thought it would do the opposite, but it did not. But I could not jump. I mean, I did jump, but it was hurting when I jumped. So I kind of got moved on from that Achilles workout and just did the weights on the steps. And I was able to do that with 50s, which was no problem. It was just the jumping that was kind of hurtful when I went to one leg hops without weights. So not good, but maybe that's something to expect. But gotta dial it down, I guess. The Achilles, yeah, it's wish it could be better. Let's see. I didn't feel much pain on the run, so yeah, it was I don't know what to say. I mean, it was like a 1 or a 0 or maybe a 2 running. Never really noticed the Achilles that much, but yeah, when I woke up this morning, I could barely walk on it until I started to stretch and work it out a little bit. Now it's feeling better, although I do have 8mm drop shoes on right now, so that's probably why I can walk around with no problem. I'm sure if I took the shoes off, it would be a different story. Just kind of makes me wonder, maybe I need to be racing this race with the 8mm drop shoes instead of the 0 drop shoes. So kind of doubting myself a little bit, but hopefully I can recover quickly. And then this is the last week before the race. So, I haven't really talked about that much about schedule, which maybe I should do that. So with scheduling, everybody has a unique plan. There's not a right or wrong plan for schedule. It's whatever you can do in your busy life that's practical for you. Some people run 5 days a week. Some people run 6 days a week. Some people run 7 days a week. I kind of enjoy cross training. I think if I ran 5 days a week or 7 days a week, I would get really bored of running and would quit it. So I kind of, for me, with my schedules, I always do cross training in it and lift weights and all that. It is recommended that you do lift weights for your legs. So not just run the whole time. And then biggest question you get asked about long runs. If you're really busy, then you split it up on the weekend. You can run on Saturday and then run on Sunday. Let's say you need to get 30 miles, so you run 10 Saturday, 20 on Sunday, or vice versa. And then you get your 30 in. Yes, that can work. And it'll give you the muscles that you need to finish the race. The only problem with that is if you have any kind of gut problems or anything like that, you might not discover that on a 20-mile run or a 10-mile run. If you do the long run 30 miles, then you can kind of figure out what you're going to figure out with your gut and what foods work and what foods you get tired of. And then it kind of prepares you for race day, because you know what foods are going to work for you and what foods aren't going to work for you. So that's kind of like the difference with splitting the long runs up and keeping the long run on the one day. Then you know more what to eat and what not to eat, or what you're going to get tired of, what you're not going to get tired of. And there's not to say there's a right food to eat or wrong food to eat. Obviously, everybody has a unique microbiome, and you got your own diets. So we won't go into that. But just talking a little bit about the scheduling, it also depends on how fast you are. You can push the limits if you're a really fast runner. So it took me 7 hours to do a 50K, but which is 31 miles. But a faster runner could maybe do a 50K in, let's say 3 hours, or maybe 4 hours. So then that person, maybe I would say push your limits a little bit farther, and maybe run for 6 hours or 7 hours, and go, with your training, because you got a lot more time, because you're such a fast runner. But everybody's schedule is unique. Yeah, I definitely just wanted to touch on that. Some people can be confused about the scheduling a little bit. The pros for the long run all on one day is you're figuring out the gut, and you're figuring out what your body's gonna do when you hit mile 25 or whatnot, or mile 28, and how you feel. So hopefully that answers some questions there. But it is okay. You're still going to get the strength if you separate it, because you have dedications with your family or whatnot, and you have to split it up. I'm just saying that if you do it all at once, then you're going to have more. I guess, awareness of your gut and what foods are working for you and what's not working for you. So, okay. Yeah. Thanks for being here. Hopefully that answers some questions, and hopefully I can get this Achilles calmed down. This week I have 7 days until my next long run, so that's great. Much needed rest, and we'll do that. Might add another Achilles workout in this week, since it's hurting so bad today, and hopefully that can help it. But I might need to stop with the 0 drop and put on an 8mm drop or a 10mm drop, or 12. So, and maybe on race day I do that, because I definitely want to finish. And the last thing I would ever want to do is snap it, right? That would not be good. Then I'd definitely be out for a very long time. So I'm just got to be careful, and be aware of my body, and just go with that. So anyways, let's hear from AI on creatine. Another thing on creatine is that you don't want it really powdery. You want it to bulk up a little bit. That's how you know the creatine's really good. When's the best time to take creatine? probably without caffeine, because caffeine is going to withhold some of your nutrients. So I would say take creatine at least an hour after your caffeine intake, so your body will be able to absorb the creatine a little bit better.
Day 2 of a 200-mile trail race.
Oh man, that's rough.
Yeah, you haven't slept in, what, over 40 hours? You're navigating this incredibly technical, route-covered descent.
In the pitch black.
Exactly, just you and a headlamp. And the shadows are playing tricks on you, rightly. The trees are literally starting to look like monsters.
Which is terrifying.
It is. And your brain is becoming, biologically speaking, highly acidic. Your working memory is just failing.
You're fully hallucinating at that point.
Right. Now, what if the solution to stop those hallucinations, to literally re-energize your brain's frontal lobe and pull you back to reality, wasn't another hit of caffeine?
Because caffeine is just masking the issue anyway.
Exactly. What if the ultimate tool to save your race was actually a massive dose of a supplement that you've probably always associated with, giant 250-pound bodybuilders?
It sounds like total science fiction, or at least a massive contradiction to literally everything we've been taught about endurance fueling. But when you actually look at the physiological reality of what happens to the human body, and especially the human brain, under that level of extreme, sustained duress, well, the traditional models completely break down.
Just eating more carbohydrates is definitely not enough to buffer the systemic damage.
No, it's really not.
And that brings us directly to you, the listener. You are likely an athlete, maybe a curious runner, or someone actively prepping for a grueling physical challenge.
Which means you've probably thought of creatine as a supplement strictly reserved for the gym bros.
Oh, 100%. You know the archetype, the guys lifting heavy weights, trying to bulk up their biceps?
Yeah, or maybe sprinters looking for that 10-second explosive power.
Exactly. If you are an endurance athlete, you've probably filed creatine away in your brain as completely irrelevant, or maybe even dangerous and counterproductive for long miles.
Which is arguably one of the most pervasive, stubbornly persistent myths in endurance sports culture today.
It really is.
There has been this long-standing, really ingrained fear of weight gain and this obsession with extreme leanness. And it has actively kept endurance athletes away from what is objectively one of the most heavily researched performance aids on the planet.
Well, today's mission is to completely dismantle that myth.
Totally.
We are pulling from a massive stack of sources today. We're synthesizing peer-reviewed academic papers. The latest definitive position stands from the International Society of Sports Nutrition.
The ISSN, yeah.
Right, the ISSN. And some truly incredible sports science field studies. We are even looking at blood data pulled directly from athletes competing in the Brazil 135.
Which is just a mind-bendingly grueling race.
Yeah, a 217-kilometer mountain ultramarathon. It's insane.
Definitely.
We're going to show you exactly how creatine is a total game changer for endurance athletes. Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
Because we need to reframe this molecule entirely. We have to stop looking at it as a bulk-up powder.
Yeah.
It's a critical, multifunctional tool for cellular recovery, brain health, and metabolic efficiency.
And to really grasp that paradigm shift, we need to focus on the underlying mechanisms. Today is all about understanding the why,
Right, we aren't just going to give you a list of claims.
Exactly. We need to look at the microscopic bioenergetics, the neuromuscular science, and the precise cellular hydration processes.
Because once you understand what this molecule is doing inside your cells at a chemical level, its application for a 100-mile run goes from seeming ridiculous to making perfect, unavoidable sense. So before we can even begin to talk about performance benefits, we really have to establish the baseline. We have to understand what is physically happening inside your body on a long run.
Right. What is actually taking place inside your muscle cells at mile 80?
Exactly. What happens when you introduce creatine into that system?
Well, to map that out, we have to start with the ATP PCR system.
Okay, lay it on us.
So ATP is adenosine triphosphate. It is the body's primary fundamental energy currency.
The gas in the tank.
Pretty much. Every single time a muscle fiber contracts, whether you are blinking your eye or sprinting up a steep hill, it uses ATP.
Okay.
And the molecule does this by literally breaking off one of its three phosphate molecules.
Hence the triphosphate.
Exactly. That breaking of the chemical bond releases the energy that actually powers the muscle contraction. But once that phosphate is broken off, you are left with ADP.
Adenosine diphosphate.
Right. It only has 2 phosphates left.
I love visualizing this. It's essentially a dead battery at that point, right?
That is the perfect way to look at it.
The energy has been spent and the muscle just can't use ADP to contract again.
The battery is dead, and your body desperately needs to recharge that ADP back into ATP to keep the muscle working.
Otherwise, you just stop.
Right. If it can't recharge it, the muscle fails. And this is precisely where creatine steps onto the stage.
Okay, here we go.
When you consume creatine, your body stores it in your muscles as phosphocreatine. You'll often see it abbreviated in the literature as PCR.
PCR, got it.
This phosphocreatine acts as a highly volatile, rapid response energy reserve. It's holding onto a spare phosphate molecule.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Yeah, so when ATP becomes ADP, the phosphocreatine immediately steps in and donates its phosphate molecule to the ADP.
It just hands it over.
Exactly. It instantly converts it back into ATP, fully charged, so you can fire that muscle again without missing a single beat.
This makes me think of an analogy.
Let's hear it.
Think of ATP as the literal cash in your pocket. It's
Yeah.
readily available. You can spend it instantly to buy a muscle contraction.
Right.
But you only have so much space in your pocket, right? You only carry a small amount of cash at one time.
Exactly. The muscle doesn't store very much pure ATP.
So when you run out of cash, you need more and you need it fast. Phosphocreatine is like the ATM sitting right next to you.
I really like that framing.
It's built right into the muscle cell, fully loaded, ready to instantly dispense more energy currency so you don't have to stop what you're doing to go all the way to the bank.
That's a great way to visualize it. The phosphocreatine system is your absolute fastest method of energy production. It is practically instantaneous.
But historically, isn't this exactly where the sports science community drew a hard line between power athletes and endurance athletes?
Oh, absolutely. The traditional thinking was always, endurance running is 80 to 90% aerobic,
Right.
meaning you are using oxygen to slowly break down carbohydrates and fats in the mitochondria. You're making ATP over a long, slow, steady period.
You aren't doing heavy explosive deadlifts, so you don't need a massive anaerobic ATM.
That was the old logic, yeah.
Hold on, let me jump in and push back here. On behalf of every marathoner and ultra runner listening right now,
Go for it.
if I am running a 100-miler, I am mostly utilizing oxygen. I'm relying on my slow twitch muscle fibers and pacing myself.
Right.
Why in the world do I care about my anaerobic ATM? Why do I need to store explosive energy if my goal is literally just to jog at a steady, sustainable pace for 12 to 24 hours?
What's fascinating here is what researchers call the surge hypothesis, and it directly answers your question.
Okay, surge hypothesis.
The reality of modern endurance racing, especially trail running and ultramarathons, is that they are rarely, if ever, contested at a perfectly steady state.
Oh, for sure. You're never just on cruise control.
Right. You are not running on a perfectly flat treadmill in a climate-controlled laboratory. You are dealing with highly varied terrain.
Yeah, you have technical rock scrambles, you have incredibly steep mountain climbs where your heart rate just spikes.
Exactly. You have to dodge roots, jump over creeks, or maybe you suddenly need to surge to pass a competitor on a narrow single track.
That is so true. Even in a road marathon, you have hills, you have headwinds, you have tactical pacing changes. You are never just outputting one continuous identical wattage.
Exactly. And those race-defining moments, the steep climbs, the sudden surges, they rely heavily on your anaerobic work capacity.
Which is often denoted in sports science literature as W prime.
Right. Yes, W prime. Your aerobic system simply cannot produce ATP fast enough to get you up a sudden 20% grade. It just can't.
It has to call in the anaerobic ATM.
It has to. And when you elevate your intramuscular creatine stores through supplementation, you significantly increase this W prime capacity.
You literally have a much larger reserve at that cellular ATM.
Yes. This allows you to handle those intermittent surges and demanding climbs without having to tap too deeply into your baseline aerobic reserve.
So instead of completely redlining my cardiovascular system on a hill climb, going to severe oxygen debt, and then spending the next 3 miles trying to recover.
Which totally ruins your pacing.
Right. Instead of that, I can just use my expanded phosphocreatine stores to power up the hill.
That's the mechanism. You use the phosphocreatine to handle the acute workload of the hill.
Wow.
Then when you crest the hill and return to flat ground, your aerobic system, which isn't completely exhausted, helps quickly recharge that phosphocreatine ATM for the next obstacle.
You are creating a metabolic buffer that actively protects your pacing.
It's incredible when you think about it like that.
That makes profound sense. It changes the whole perspective on what endurance actually requires.
It really does.
But there's another piece to the cellular bioenergetics here that I want to challenge because it's something runners actively fear.
I think I know what you're going to say.
When you take creatine, the literature is very clear that it draws water into the muscle cell. It swells the cell.
Yes, cellular volumization.
Historically, runners have completely freaked out about this. They call it water weight or bloating. They look at the scale, see they're 3 pounds heavier, and just panic.
Which is understandable if you don't know the science.
Right. But the cellular volumization isn't just dead, useless water weight, is it? It's an active metabolic signal.
It is a profound physiological trigger, and it is a massive advantage that is totally misunderstood.
Okay, break it down for us.
When that intracellular water pulls into the muscle fiber, the physical swelling of the cell wall actually upregulates something called glucose transporter protein 4.
Or GLUT4.
Exactly, GLUT4.
Let's zoom in on that. The GLUT4 transporters are essentially the doorways on the outside of the muscle cell that let sugar from your blood inside, right?
Yes. Normally those doorways are closed. And it takes insulin, which is released when you eat carbohydrates, to come along and unlock them.
So insulin opens the door.
Right, allowing glucose to enter the muscle where it can be stored as glycogen. But by physically swelling the cell, creatine acts as an independent trigger to upregulate GLUT4.
Oh, really? Without insulin?
Well, it enhances the whole process. It forces more of those doorways to open and actually move to the surface of the cell. It massively increases the muscle sensitivity to glucose uptake.
So by having expanded, hydrated cells,
Yeah.
you are literally pulling more glycogen, more of your primary endurance fuel into the muscle tissue.
You are expanding the fuel tank.
That is wild.
So to bring it back to your earlier analogy,
Wow.
not only do you have a much bigger ATM for rapid explosive energy when you hit a hill,
You have actually widened the doorway to pull in more long-term aerobic fuel.
exactly. The synergy between creatine and carbohydrate metabolism is incredible. They are not competing systems at all. They amplify each other.
Okay, the bioenergetics are clear. We've got the expanded ATM full of cash for surges, and we have upregulated GLUT4 doors pulling in massive amounts of carbohydrates.
It's a beautiful
It
system.
really is. Now that we understand how the engine works at a microscopic level, let's step back and look at the macro.
The real world application.
Right. Let's look at how this translates to performance, to survival, and to actually getting across the finish line.
Because that's what the listener really wants to know.
Exactly. We've grouped the findings from the literature into overarching themes to show you the top 10 specific benefits for ultra runners. Let's hit the top 10 benefits for ultra runners taking creatine.
And we should definitely start with the most immediate, tangible benefit on race day, which we kind of touched on with the bioenergetics.
Benefit number 1, enhanced surge and hill climbing power.
Right. Because your phosphocreatine stores are saturated, your ability to tackle a technical ridgeline, initiate a breakaway, or handle sudden pace changes is vastly improved.
It makes a huge difference.
In fact, a study looking specifically at triathletes showed an 18% improvement in power output during high-intensity intervals.
18% is huge.
It is. And the craziest part is that these intervals were performed after the athletes were already deeply fatigued from aerobic exercise.
Wait, let me make sure I'm hearing that correctly. It's not just that they had more power when they were fresh at the start line.
No, not at all.
They had 18% more power when they were already exhausted.
That is the crucial distinction for an ultra runner. It's late-stage race power.
Wow.
When your slow twitch fibers are failing, your ability to recruit fully saturated fast twitch fibers via the phosphocreatine system can literally keep you moving forward.
That leads directly into another major bioenergetic benefit, which is benefit number 2, the finishing kick.
Oh, yeah. We've all seen it or felt it.
You run for 12 hours, you finally see the finish line arch in the distance, and suddenly you need to sprint.
You dig deep.
Multiple studies, including specific trials on 30-kilometer trail races and half Ironman triathlon events, show that athletes supplementing with creatine have significantly increased power output for that final sprint.
It's super documented.
When everyone around you is completely depleted and reduced to a painful shuffle, that saturated ATP system gives you the fuel to surge when the finish line is actually in sight.
And that power availability doesn't just apply to race day either. It fundamentally alters your training block.
Which brings us to benefit number 3, accelerated recovery between sessions.
In endurance sports, recovery is really the hidden determinant of success.
Oh, absolutely. It really doesn't matter what your VO2 max is on paper if your legs are continually trashed and your central nervous system is completely fried from back-to-back long runs.
Right. You can't execute a high-quality speed workout on Tuesday if you were still metabolically destroyed from your 20-mile run on Saturday.
You're just digging a hole.
Because creatine allows for rapid ATP regeneration, the residual fatigue doesn't pile up the same way.
So you bounce back faster.
You aren't just recovering faster mid-race, you are recovering your cellular energy pools faster between training days. You can handle a higher total volume of quality work without pushing into overtraining syndrome.
And a massive part of that accelerated recovery is tied to the next major benefit, number 4, glycogen sparing and faster replenishment.
This goes right back to those GLUT4 transporters.
Exactly. We talked extensively about them pulling sugar into the cell. Well, when you finish a grueling run, your glycogen tank is empty.
It's tapped out.
The literature shows that when you pair creatine with carbohydrates in your post-workout window, your muscles restock their fuel significantly faster within a 24-hour period compared to just eating carbohydrates alone.
You are using that cellular swelling to literally reload your primary fuel source more efficiently.
It's like having a bigger funnel for your gas tank.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
But, that really just covers the energy side of the equation.
All right, there's a whole other side to this.
To fully appreciate what this molecule does, we need to transition away from power and look at tissue damage. We need to look at structural integrity.
This is where the literature really blew my mind, because this is where we get into the Brazil 135 mountain ultramarathon study.
Oh, this study is legendary.
Let me paint a picture of this race for you. This is a 217-kilometer foot race through the mountains of Brazil.
In absolute brutal conditions.
The athletes are dealing with extreme heat, oppressive humidity, and over 12,000 meters of cumulative elevation change.
That is just hard to comprehend.
It's like climbing Mount Everest from sea level and then adding another half Everest on top of it, all while running.
The physical trauma of an event like that is difficult to overstate.
I can't even imagine.
When athletes subject their bodies to that level of eccentric loading, the constant pounding of running downhill, it induces an acute phase inflammatory response.
So the body's just panicking.
Completely. The systemic stress, the actual breakdown of muscle tissue is so severe that the blood markers often resemble those of a patient suffering from clinical sepsis.
That is terrifying. Wait, if I am running faster and surging harder because of my expanded ATP pool from the creatine, aren't I just tearing my muscle fibers apart even more?
That's the logical assumption, right?
Yeah. How does the body survive that?
That brings us to the profound benefit, number 5, reduced muscle damage and inflammation.
Okay, tell me how this works.
The researchers monitored these athletes in Brazil, looking specifically at the blood markers of muscle destruction.
What are they looking for in the blood?
Well, when muscle fibers tear, they leak specific intracellular enzymes into the bloodstream. The big ones are creatine kinase, or CK, lactate dehydrogenase, LDH, and aspartate aminotransferase, AST.
Okay, so if your blood is full of CK and LDH, it means your muscle cells are literally bursting open and spilling their guts into your veins.
Precisely. It's a bloodbath at the cellular level. But the study demonstrated that athletes who had optimized their creatine stores showed a massive buffering effect against this acute phase inflammatory response.
It acted almost like a systemic shock absorber.
Yes. The massive leakage of these destructive enzymes was significantly mitigated. The cellular walls of the muscle fibers actually remained far more stable.
How is that possible, though? How does an energy molecule stabilize a cell wall?
It comes back to that cellular hydration we were talking about.
The water weight.
Exactly. By pulling water into the cell and maintaining structural turgor pressure, the lipid bilayer, which is the actual skin of the muscle cell, becomes way more resilient to the mechanical shearing forces of running downhill.
Oh, I get it. The cell is plumper, it's more hydrated, and so it's less likely to physically rupture under stress.
You nailed it. It's like stepping on a fully inflated water balloon versus a deflated one.
Which perfectly transitions into another highly misunderstood benefit, number 6, thermoregulation and heat tolerance.
This is a big one.
If you go to any starting line and ask the old school runners about creatine, they will tell you it causes dehydration and heat cramps.
Oh, yeah. It's a locker room myth that has survived for decades.
And it is not just slightly wrong. It is the exact opposite of biological reality. Let's look at the mechanism.
Please do.
When you run in extreme heat, you sweat. Sweating reduces your blood plasma volume.
Right. Your blood literally gets thicker.
And when your blood becomes thicker, your heart has to work exponentially harder to pump it to your skin to cool you down and to your muscles to deliver oxygen.
This is known as cardiovascular drift, and it totally destroys your pacing.
But wait, if creatine is pulling water into the muscle cell, isn't it stealing water from the blood? Doesn't that make the drift worse?
That was the fear for a long time. But the human body is incredibly adaptive.
How so?
When you supplement with creatine and pull that water into the intracellular compartment, your body naturally signals you to drink more to maintain equilibrium.
You just naturally get thirstier.
Right. And the net result is an overall increase in total body water. That intracellular reservoir actually acts as a thermal buffer.
So it's protecting you from the inside.
It helps maintain your plasma volume during intense sweating. It actively delays the onset of heat fatigue and attenuates the rise in your core body temperature, all without negatively impacting your natural sweat rate.
You essentially have a larger internal radiator.
Exactly.
That completely flips the dehydration myth on its head.
Yeah.
And it ties directly into benefit number 7, injury prevention.
They go hand in hand.
Because your cells are highly hydrated and your ATP levels are fully stocked, the muscle tissue is protected from seizing up.
The data on this is fantastic.
Yeah, large-scale reviews in the literature show unequivocally that athletes using creatine experience fewer muscle cramps, fewer muscle strains, and lower incidences of heat illness compared to non-users.
And we really can't talk about injury prevention without addressing the skeleton itself. We have to look at benefit number 8, enhanced bone density.
This one fascinated me. We think of creatine strictly as a muscle supplement. Why does it affect bone?
Well, bone is not dead tissue. It is highly active, constantly remodeling itself.
Right, you have cells breaking it down and building it up.
Exactly. You have cells called osteoclasts that break down old bone, and cells called osteoblasts that build new bone matrix.
Okay.
Building new bone requires a massive amount of cellular energy. The osteoblasts are heavily dependent on ATP to synthesize that matrix.
So by providing more raw energy via phosphocreatine, you are literally giving the bone building cells the fuel they need to work faster.
That's exactly it. The sources highlight that creatine increases the activity of these osteoblasts.
That's amazing.
Now, you still need the mechanical stimulus, like the impact of running or the strain of resistance training, to tell the bone to actually grow.
You can't just sit on the couch taking it.
Right. But when you combine that mechanical load with creatine supplementation, it leads to stronger, denser bones.
For endurance runners who are constantly dealing with the threat of stress fractures from repetitive impact forces, this structural durability is phenomenal.
It's a huge safety net.
And what happens if the worst occurs and you do get a stress fracture? What if you were sidelined, stuck in a walking boot for 6 weeks?
That brings us to benefit number 9, maintenance of muscle mass.
This is vital for injury recovery, right?
Absolutely. And also for addressing age-related muscle loss known as sarcopenia, which starts creeping in for masters runners in their 30s and 40s.
It's a real problem.
When a limb is immobilized in a cast or a boot, muscle atrophy happens incredibly fast. The tissue just wastes away.
You lose it if you don't use it.
However, maintaining creatine supplementation during periods of immobilization helps preserve lean tissue.
Really? Just by taking the powder?
Yeah. The volumization of the cell signals the body to retain the muscle proteins, preventing the rapid atrophy that usually occurs when you can't train.
It is a complete survival toolkit for the physical body. We were talking about buffering inflammation, pulling in glycogen, protecting bone density, and regulating core temperature.
It covers all the bases.
But perhaps the most vital tool in this entire kit is what it does for your central nervous system. I want to dedicate our next major focus to this because the cognitive demands of ultra endurance are arguably as challenging as the physical ones.
Oh, without a doubt.
Let's really drill down into benefit number 10. Cognitive protection. How does creatine affect my brain when I run?
The brain-muscle axis is critical. To understand this, we have to look at what happens during profound sleep deprivation.
Like we mentioned at the very beginning.
Right. As you mentioned in your opening, if you are running a 200-mile race, you are out there for 2, maybe 3 days, often running straight through the night with 0 sleep.
The sleep monsters. The hallucinations. The complete loss of emotional regulation.
From a neurological perspective, under those conditions, the brain becomes severely metabolically stressed.
It's starving.
Your brain is only about 2% of your body weight, but it consumes 20% of your body's total ATP. It is an absolute energy hog.
20%? That's huge.
During extended wakefulness, especially combined with physical exertion, the brain's energy demands drastically outstrip its supply.
So what happens then?
As the brain struggles to maintain ATP levels, metabolic byproducts accumulate, and we see a measurable drop in cerebral pH.
The actual environment of your brain becomes more acidic.
Yes.
And that acidity is what causes the cognitive decline. Like you start making terrible navigational decisions, you forget your fueling strategy, you trip over rocks because your reaction time is shot.
That's the exact cascade of failure. The acidity impairs neurotransmitter function, leading to a severe deterioration in working memory, processing speed, and vigilance.
It's terrifying when you're out there on a cliff edge.
But this is where high-dose creatine acts as a potent neuroprotector. By saturating the brain's creatine stores, you provide a profound metabolic buffer.
Now, I noticed in the literature that saturating the brain requires a completely different approach than saturating the muscles. Why is that?
The brain is protected by the blood-brain barrier, which is highly selective about what it lets in.
It's like a bouncer at a club.
Exactly. And the brain actually synthesizes its own baseline creatine internally.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so because of this barrier, getting supplemental creatine from your bloodstream into your brain tissue is much harder than getting it into a bicep or a calf muscle.
It resists it.
Right. It requires higher doses over a longer period to see significant neural saturation. But when you do achieve it, creatine prevents that cerebral pH drop.
What does that look like in practical testing? Like, how do they measure that?
Researchers use tools like the psychomotor vigilance test.
Okay, what is that?
Imagine staring at a screen while completely sleep deprived and having to press a button the absolute millisecond a light flashes.
Sounds like torture.
It is. When you are sleep deprived, your reaction time plummets, and you have these lapses where you just completely zone out.
Right.
But studies show that individuals who have saturated their brain creatine maintain their reaction time and vigilance significantly better than non-users when deprived of sleep.
It literally keeps the frontal lobe firing.
It does. It even shows incredible promise in assisting recovery from mild traumatic brain injuries, like concussions, by stabilizing the neural energy environment when the brain is traumatized.
Here's where it gets really interesting. I was reading through the field notes from these extreme races, and athletes are now experimenting with an entirely new protocol.
The acute dosing.
Yes. They are taking a single, acute, massive high dose of creatine very late in a race.
Which goes against normal protocol.
Completely. They aren't doing it for their muscles. Their muscles are already trashed.
Yeah.
They are doing it purely to stave off the sleep-deprived hallucinations.
Because their cerebral pH is dropping.
Right. They are hitting night 2. The world is melting around them. And instead of taking more caffeine, which just acts as an adenosine blocker, masking the fatigue while dangerously spiking their heart rate, they take a massive dose of creatine to actually re-energize the brain's frontal lobe with raw ATP.
That is absolute frontier science.
It is so cool.
It truly is. We are moving beyond muscular bioenergetics and stepping firmly into neurobiology and athletics. We are chemically buffering the brain against the trauma of wakefulness.
Okay, now, while we are on the topic of vital organs, we absolutely have to address the liver.
Definitely a common concern.
Because a very common, very understandable question from athletes is, how does creatine affect my liver when I run? Especially when I'm already pushing my body to the limit.
Right. People associate processing heavy supplements with liver toxicity or strain.
Exactly.
Well, it's important to understand your baseline biology here. Your body is not a stranger to this molecule. You naturally synthesize about 1 to 2 grams of creatine internally every single day.
Just automatically.
Yes. This natural synthesis occurs primarily in the liver and to a lesser extent in the pancreas.
Okay.
The liver uses 3 specific amino acids to build creatine: arginine, glycine, and methionine.
Got it.
Now, when you are doing high volume endurance training, your daily turnover of creatine is highly elevated because of the sheer volume of muscle contractions. Your body is constantly breaking it down into creatinine and excreting it.
So your liver's already working around the clock to manufacture this stuff just to keep you at a baseline.
Correct. When you ingest supplementary creatine, you are simply filling the muscular stores from the outside.
Which actually helps the liver.
Yeah, it relieves the liver of the burden of having to synthesize it all from scratch.
Oh, that makes sense.
Extensive longitudinal studies, some tracking athletes for up to 5 years of continuous daily use, show conclusively that creatine supplementation does not harm healthy livers.
That's great to hear.
It does not alter hepatic function markers in any pathological way.
Is there any scenario where it is dangerous for the liver?
The only caveat in the literature is for individuals with pre-existing hepatic disorders, people who already have clinical liver disease.
Because their liver is already compromised.
Right. In those cases, the liver's overall ability to process any metabolites might be compromised, so they need to exercise caution and require medical monitoring.
But for a healthy endurance athlete, the liver processes and manages supplemental creatine perfectly.
Without issue.
Okay, we have thoroughly covered the magic. We've talked about the brain buffering, the power surges, the structural integrity. But we promise the listener a deep dive. And that means we have to look at the dark side of the moon too.
It is definitely not all upside.
No, it's not. If you mismanage this supplement, if you take the wrong dose at the wrong time, it can absolutely derail your race.
Completely.
So what are the top 5 risk factors for ultra runners taking creatine? Let's walk through the pitfalls.
We have to start with the most mechanically impactful risk: weight gain and reduced running economy.
The water weight we talked about.
Yes. We spent a lot of time praising the cellular volumization, the water being pulled into the muscle to upregulate GLUT4.
Expanding the fuel tank.
But physics is still physics. During the initial saturation phase, an athlete will typically gain between 1 and 2 kilograms of intracellular water weight.
For the interior listeners, that is roughly 2 to 4.5 pounds of new weight.
Right.
And if you are a runner who meticulously tracks your weight, stepping on the scale and seeing you gain 4 pounds overnight is terrifying. You immediately start doing the math on how much that extra weight is going to slow your pace.
And that math is very real.
Is it?
Oh, yeah. In a non-weight bearing sport like cycling or swimming, that extra mass has almost zero negative impact because the bike or the water is supporting you.
But running is fundamentally a weight-bearing activity.
Exactly. Every time your foot strikes the ground, you have to propel that extra mass forward and upward.
Which takes energy.
On a flat, fast course like a road marathon, carrying an extra 2 kilograms acts as a pure physical liability. It directly reduces your running economy.
Meaning it costs you more oxygen and more baseline energy just to maintain your normal pace.
Precisely. That is why it is highly contextual.
Okay, break that context down.
If you were running a flat marathon, the weight penalty might actually outweigh the bioenergetic benefit.
But if you are running a mountainous ultra with massive power hiking sections,
then the benefit of the anaerobic ATM far outweighs the weight penalty.
that is a crucial distinction. Okay, let's look at risk factor number 2, which is the one I think athletes fear the most on race day. Gastrointestinal or GI distress.
Oh, the dreaded stomach issues.
Yeah. Nothing ends an ultramarathon faster than severe stomach issues. You can't run if you are bent over in a ditch.
The literature is very clear on why this happens. Taking large single doses of creatine, specifically anything over 10 grams at once, can be an absolute digestive disaster.
Why is that?
Because creatine is a highly osmotically active substance.
Let's zoom in on that word, osmotically active. What does that actually mean inside my stomach?
Think of putting a completely dry sponge inside a sealed pipe. If you dump a massive dose of creatine powder into your stomach and your intestines can't absorb it fast enough into the bloodstream, that unabsorbed powder acts like the sponge.
Oh.
Because it is osmotically active, it literally pulls water from your surrounding body tissues into your intestinal tract to dilute the massive concentration of the powder.
It's just flushing the system.
Exactly. It floods the gut with water, which leads to immediate, severe bloating, aggressive cramping, and profound osmotic diarrhea.
Yeah, sprinting to the porta potty instead of the finish line.
It's the worst.
That leads us to risk factor number 3, which is far more serious from a medical standpoint. Acute kidney injury, or AKI, risk under severe dehydration.
Now, we need to be incredibly precise here because we don't want to spread misinformation.
Right, let's be unequivocal.
Okay.
Creatine itself does not cause kidney damage in healthy individuals. Decades of safety data prove that.
However, we have to look back at the extreme environment of the Brazil 135 mountain ultramarathon.
The 12,000 meters of elevation change.
Yes. During these extreme events, athletes experience profound muscle breakdown rhabdomyolysis.
Right.
Their blood is absolutely flooded with massive amounts of those torn muscle proteins we mentioned earlier, like CK, LDH, and myoglobin.
And the kidneys are responsible for filtering all of that out of the blood.
Think of your kidneys like a coffee filter. If you dump massive toxic amounts of sludgy muscle proteins into the filter, it starts to clog.
And in a race like that, they're usually severely dehydrated too. There isn't enough water to push the sludge through.
Exactly. The Brazil 135 study showed that glomerular filtration rates, the GFR, which measures exactly how well the kidneys are filtering that blood, dropped by more than 25% in many of the athletes.
The filter was literally failing.
Now, if you take an athlete who has extreme muscle breakdown, who is severely dehydrated, and then you add the additional metabolic load of clearing large amounts of supplemental creatine.
And its waste byproduct, creatinine.
Right, through those same kidneys, you are creating a perfect storm. You are putting an immense compound strain on an already failing filtration system.
Wow. So it's not the creatine causing the injury, it's the creatine adding an extra workload to a kidney that is already suffocating from dehydration and torn muscle fibers.
That is exactly the distinction.
Which brings us to risk factor number 4, which I find fascinating because it is largely psychological, but it manifests physical symptoms: compartment and cramp paranoia.
This one is wild.
We established earlier that the scientific evidence actually proves creatine reduces the incidence of muscle cramps by hydrating the cell. The data is totally clear on that.
It is unequivocal.
But the old myth that creatine causes cramping or causes dangerous pressure in the lower leg known as compartment syndrome is so deeply ingrained in running culture.
It really is. And athletes who take it often experience severe anxiety the moment they feel even a slight twinge in their calves.
The psychosomatic effect. They feel a twinge, they remember the locker room rumor, and they just panic.
And that panic alters their behavior.
How?
Well, if they don't understand their actual hydration needs, this persistent psychological fear can cause them to drastically alter their running gait to protect the calf.
Which then causes a hip injury.
Exactly. Or they overhydrate out of fear of cramping, leading to hyponatremia, dangerously low blood sodium.
The paranoia ruins their race, not the supplement.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it really highlights how bad information can physically destroy performance.
Finally, we have risk factor number 5, false positive drug tests.
Yeah, this is a frustrating one. High creatine use inevitably leads to the excretion of excess creatinine in the urine. That is just the natural waste product.
Sure.
However, anti-doping agencies often flag unusually high creatinine levels.
Why?
Because historically, athletes trying to cheat would drink massive amounts of water to dilute their urine and hide banned substances. But diluted urine has no creatinine in it, which is a dead giveaway to the testers. So cheaters started taking creatine to artificially spike their urine creatinine levels to make their diluted urine look normal.
That's sneaky. So while creatine itself is perfectly legal and not a banned substance, an innocent ultra runner taking it for bioenergetic benefits might find themselves dealing with the massive stress of a flag test simply because of their metabolic clearance.
Exactly. It's a bureaucratic nightmare caused by normal metabolism.
Those are 5 very real, very consequential risks. But if we look at them objectively, almost all of these risks, the GI distress, the kidney strain, the weight gain, are dose dependent.
They are entirely manageable with proper protocols.
But that raises a very logical question from the listener. If there are risks to the engineered powder, can I just eat my way to optimal creatine levels?
That's usually the first question people ask.
So what are the top 10 whole foods I can eat to have natural creatine in my body?
It's a great question, and it's the first place athletes look when they want to avoid supplements.
Naturally.
However, when we look at the source literature to identify those top 10 whole foods, the science doesn't actually provide a neat, specific top 10 list of individual items.
The researchers don't rank them 1 through 10?
No. Instead, the literature clearly identifies the primary dietary categories where this molecule is naturally found: red meat, seafood, and poultry.
So beef, salmon, chicken, herring.
Exactly. Because creatine is fundamentally stored in muscle tissue, eating the skeletal muscle of animals is how you acquire dietary creatine.
There is no significant plant-based source.
None. And this creates a fascinating, highly consequential physiological divide in the endurance community. Plant-based athletes have a massive biological disadvantage here.
Because their diet contains virtually zero creatine.
Right. Vegetarians and vegans exhibit drastically lower baseline intramuscular creatine levels compared to their omnivorous peers. Their metabolic ATM is perpetually running on low.
And as a result of that low baseline, they are what the sports science literature calls hyperresponders.
Precisely. When a vegan or vegetarian athlete finally starts supplementing with synthetic creatine, they see the most dramatic, statistically significant benefits across the board.
Because they are filling a massive biological tank that was sitting completely empty.
The delta of improvement is huge for them.
Now, I was curious about the flip side of this equation. I actively searched the literature looking for dietary antagonists.
Oh, interesting.
I wanted to know, what are the top 10 whole foods that suppress my body from making natural creatine? Are there foods I need to avoid?
And what did the literature say?
The science doesn't point to specific dietary suppressants at all. There aren't 10 foods, or even one specific food, that actively shuts down your liver's natural production.
Right.
The literature focuses instead on the fact that intense, high-volume endurance training itself is what severely depletes your natural stores.
It's the workload.
Yeah. If you are running 60 miles a week, your body is burning through ATP and utilizing creatine vastly faster than your liver can manufacture it, or your diet can realistically replace it.
It's an energy deficit issue, not a dietary suppression issue.
There is no magical anti-creatine vegetable you accidentally ate.
That's a vital clarification. It's a supply and demand problem. But to address the idea of just eating your way to full muscular saturation.
Yeah. That's exactly what I want to know. Can I just eat a massive steak the night before my long run and top off my ATM?
You could, theoretically, but let's look at the actual math and the practical digestive reality of that strategy.
Okay, do the math.
To get the equivalent of a standard 5-gram daily maintenance dose of creatine, you would need to consume roughly 2 to 3 pounds of raw beef or raw salmon every single day.
Oh, wow. 2 to 3 pounds every day.
Yes. Aside from the sheer financial expense of buying 3 pounds of salmon daily, trying to digest 3 pounds of dense, heavy red meat while attempting to run high mileage is a gastrointestinal nightmare.
I can't even imagine running with that in my stomach.
The sheer fat and protein load would require so much blood flow to your stomach for digestion that your running economy would plummet.
Yeah.
It would completely derail your digestive system.
So it's not realistic.
No, supplementation in this specific case is not a shortcut. It is a functional necessity to reach optimal muscular saturation without completely overloading your digestive tract.
Okay, that math makes the decision incredibly easy. We are not eating 3 pounds of steak a day. We are going to supplement.
Good call.
So you decide to go that route. You walk into a supplement store or you log on to an online retailer and you are immediately assaulted with a wall of confusing options, neon labels, and highly aggressive marketing buzzwords.
It's overwhelming.
What different forms of creatine exist and what is definitively the best type of creatine to take? Welcome to the creatine wars. Let's debunk these so-called next generation forms.
The sports supplement industry is a multi-billion-dollar machine, and it thrives on creating new and improved iterations of basic compounds simply to secure new patents and justify astronomically higher price points.
So true.
Let's start with creatine ethyl ester, or CEE, and the liquid or serum forms of creatine.
The marketing on the bottle claims these have superior bioavailability and instantly absorb into your muscles.
But what does the actual science say?
The science heavily aggressively critiques them. Liquid creatine is notoriously chemically unstable.
Highly unstable.
When creatine sits in a liquid solution for an extended period, the molecule undergoes cyclization. It bends and degrades rapidly into useless creatinine, the waste product we discussed earlier, before you even unscrew the cap.
Which is crazy when you think about it.
CEE has been shown to be chemically unstable in the acidic environment of the body, degrading in the exact same way. The literature literally refers to these expensive designer forms as nothing more than expensive urine. You are paying for waste.
Expensive urine. Ouch.
Okay, what about buffered creatine? I see products like Crealkaline pushed heavily. They claim they optimize the pH so the molecule survives your harsh stomach acid better.
It is marketed brilliantly to sound incredibly scientific, but it has been completely and thoroughly debunked by the International Society of Sports Nutrition.
Debunked how?
Standard creatine survives the acidic environment of the human stomach with nearly perfect efficacy. The buffering agents they add, like magnesium or baking soda, do absolutely nothing to promote greater creatine retention in the muscle.
So they don't work better.
No. And they offer zero performance benefits compared to the standard form. You are paying triple the price for a chemical solution to a digestive problem that literally does not exist.
Okay, what about the compounds? Creatine nitrate or creatine citrate?
These forms chemically bind the creatine molecule to a nitrate or a citric acid molecule. They do actually offer extremely high solubility in water. They mix very clear.
And the nitrates might offer a mild vasodilation effect, a pump, which weightlifters enjoy because their veins pop.
But again, for an endurance athlete, they are heavily overpriced and offer no proven bioavailability advantage for actual muscle saturation over the baseline standard.
There's one alternative form mentioned in the literature that actually gets a qualified nod of approval, though. Creatine HCl or hydrochloride.
Yes. Creatine HCl combines the base molecule with hydrochloric acid. This alters the pH in a way that makes it incredibly soluble. It dissolves almost instantly and completely in a tiny, tiny amount of water.
Does it work better?
Now, to be clear, it does not offer any superior performance gains or higher muscle saturation over the standard form.
Okay, but it is an excellent, viable alternative for runners who have extremely sensitive stomachs, who naturally lack stomach acid, and who genuinely suffer from that severe GI distress or osmotic bloating we talked about with standard powders.
Because it requires so little water to dissolve, it is much gentler on the gut.
Exactly.
But despite all these fancy iterations, the undisputed champion, the absolute gold standard of the literature,
is creatine monohydrate. Specifically, you want to look for micronized creatine monohydrate, which is often branded under the trademark Creepure.
the classic.
This specific form is backed by over 1,000 peer-reviewed studies. It costs literally pennies a day. It is nearly 100% bioavailable to the human body, and it has decades of proven, rigorous safety data.
It is the king. Do not overcomplicate it.
Exactly.
So monohydrate is the king. But when taking it, what is the best form of absorption for the body? Should I take it as a loose powder, swallow pills, or take those new trendy candy-like gummies? Powder is the ultimate form for absorption, economy, and dosing flexibility. Because you mix it into a liquid yourself right before drinking, it easily passes from the stomach into the intestines for rapid absorption.
What about pills?
Pills can be convenient if you are traveling to a race, but to hit a standard 5-gram dose, you often have to swallow 6 to 10 extremely large capsules a day.
Which is tedious and uncomfortable.
Very. And gummies are highly problematic. The manufacturing process often destroys the active ingredient. They are heavily loaded with unnecessary sugars, and they routinely raise massive red flags regarding purity and third-party testing.
Stick to the unflavored powder.
Definitely stick to the powder.
All right, we have our weapon of choice. Micronized creatine monohydrate powder. Now we need the exact battle plan. How exactly should ultra runners take this to maximize all the bioenergetic and neuroprotective benefits while completely avoiding the 5 risks, especially the weight gain and the GI distress that we discussed?
Protocol is everything here.
What is the right dose of creatine to take on a long run?
The very first rule for endurance athletes when establishing a protocol: ditch the loading phase.
The classic loading phase.
If you go to a gym, the traditional bodybuilder advice tells you to load 20 grams a day for 5 to 7 days to rapidly saturate the muscles.
Right. They tell you to take 5 grams 4 times a day with juice.
Do not do this if you are a runner. Taking 20 grams a day is exactly the mechanism that triggers that rapid 1 to 2 kilograms of intracellular water weight gain.
The dreaded water weight.
It is exactly what overloads the gut and severely increases the risk of the osmotic diarrhea and bloating. As an ultra runner, your absolute priority is mechanical efficiency and keeping a happy, functional stomach.
You do not need to saturate your muscles in 5 days.
Instead, you utilize a slow and steady maintenance dose of exactly 3 to 5 grams per day.
Just 3 to 5 grams. A single teaspoon. That's it.
Because the dose is so low, it will take longer, roughly 28 days, to fully saturate your muscular stores.
But the trade-off is worth it.
Completely. By taking the slow route, you completely bypass the extreme water retention shocks. Your stomach easily absorbs the small dose without drawing excess water into the gut, and you protect your running mechanics.
Okay, so 3 to 5 grams a day. When is the best time to take creatine? And what specific foods should I take with it to ensure the absolute best absorption into the muscle?
Timing and macronutrient pairings are where you can really optimize the protocol. The most scientifically supported time to take your dose is post-workout.
Post-workout, not before.
Right. After a long run, your muscle blood flow is highly elevated, and your cells are chemically primed for nutrient uptake to begin the repair process.
Makes sense.
As for food pairings, you want to mix the unflavored powder with a liquid water or juice and consume it alongside roughly 50 grams of carbohydrates and a moderate amount of protein.
So throwing a scoop into a post-run whey protein and banana smoothie, or just stirring it into a big glass of orange juice alongside a bagel.
Exactly. And the physiological why behind that pairing is crucial. Consuming those specific carbohydrates and proteins creates a rapid spike in your body's insulin levels.
Insulin, the transporter.
Right. Insulin acts as a transport shuttle in the blood. It binds to those GLUT4 transporters we talked about in the very beginning, driving them to the cell surface, which effectively pulls the creatine and the glycogen directly into the muscle cells at a highly accelerated rate.
You are using insulin to actively push the supplement into the tissue.
This raises an important question, though, especially for runners who are notoriously forgetful about post-run nutrition.
Guilty.
What if I finish my run, get distracted, and forget to take it post-workout? Is the whole system ruined? Am I losing my W prime?
Am I going to hit a wall?
No, and this is a crucial distinction to relieve some anxiety. Consistency matters far, far more than obsessing over exact microtiming.
Oh, that's a relief.
Creatine works entirely via long-term cellular accumulation and saturation. It is not an acute stimulant with an instant effect, like drinking a cup of coffee.
Right.
Taking your 3 to 5 grams every single day is the single most important factor. If you take it in the morning with breakfast on your rest days and post-workout on your training days, your muscular and neural stores will remain fully saturated.
The insulin spike post-workout is optimal, but daily consistency is the absolute baseline requirement.
Exactly.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's bring this massive physiological journey all together. So what does this all mean for you, the listener?
Big picture time.
After looking at the bioenergetics, the Brazil 135 trauma markers, the brain buffering, and the digestion mechanics, the conclusion is clear. Creatine is not a magic bullet.
Yeah.
Taking a scoop of monohydrate is not going to magically allow you to run a sub 24-hour 100-miler without putting in the grueling necessary training block.
It does not replace the miles on your legs.
But it is an incredibly vital, misunderstood tool. It's a tool for rapid cellular recovery and buffering microscopic tissue damage.
It is a tool for maximizing your glycogen replenishment.
It is a profound neuroprotector for your sleep-deprived acidic brain.
And it gives you that expanded anaerobic ATM to handle the steep technical climbs, the sudden race day surges, and that final aggressive kick to the finish line.
Ultimately, it allows your biology to handle the extreme, unnatural duress of ultra-endurance with far more resilience.
It mitigates the collateral damage of the sport so you can train more consistently, recover faster, and race harder.
Exactly.
Okay.
And I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over as you head out for your next run.
Lay it on them.
As 200-mile races and even longer multi-day expedition races become more and more popular, we are stepping into a wild, unexplored frontier of neurobiology in athletics.
We really are.
We talked about those runners using single acute high doses late in a race. Will we soon see a day where ultra runners completely ditch their traditional late race caffeine gels?
It's possible.
Will the aid stations at mile 180 soon be handing out specialized acute high-dose creatine packets specifically designed to fight off the hallucinogenic pH-altering effects of severe sleep deprivation on night 2 of a race?
That would change everything.
It fundamentally shifts how we view the concept of fueling. We are no longer just fueling the legs. We are chemically buffering the brain against reality.
It's a truly fascinating area of emerging science, and it proves that no matter how much we think we know, there is always more to learn about how our bodies can adapt to and survive extreme stress.
We want to thank you, the listener, for taking this deep dive with us today. We hope we've shattered some locker room myths, explained the microscopic why behind the performance, and given you some serious science to chew on.
Train smart.
Stay hydrated, and maybe it's time to deeply reconsider exactly what belongs in your endurance toolkit. Until next time.
What if the exact same tub of white powder sitting on the bench of a 1990s bodybuilding gym is actually the ultimate neuroprotective rescue tool for someone running 100 miles through the mountains?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds completely absurd when you first say it out loud.
Right. But welcome to the deep dive, everybody. If you are joining us today, we are taking this massive stack of sources you've shared with us, the clinical trials, the meta-analyses, physiology reports, field journals, and we're unpacking what I can only call a massive paradigm shift in sports nutrition.
It really is. We are taking creatine out of the fluorescent lighting of the weight rib, right?
Yeah.
And we're dropping it straight into the middle of a muddy, high-altitude trail.
Exactly. Our mission today is to uncover the actual science of what this compound does for cellular energy, for brain rescue and tissue recovery when you push the human body to its absolute physical limits in an ultramarathon.
And the crossover here is just biologically fascinating because we're talking about two vastly different phenotypes. I mean, a bodybuilder is training for maximal isolated concentric contraction. They want visible hypertrophy.
They want to look good on a stage.
Right. But an ultra endurance runner, whether they're tackling 50 miles or 200 miles, they are navigating a massive multi-system stressor.
Yeah, it's not just a long jog.
Not at all.
Yeah.
We're talking about acute energy crises, severe sleep deprivation, systemic inflammation that literally mimics clinical sepsis, and staggering eccentric muscle trauma. So evaluating a supplement in this context requires us to, well, move past the superficial metric of just, does it make you faster?
We have to ask a much more complex question, like how does it mitigate the specific brutal physiological cascades triggered by running for 20 or 30 hours straight?
Exactly.
So to approach that question, we need a functional framework. And if you're out there listening, maybe training for one of these events yourself, I find it really helpful to look at your body's energy systems through the lens of personal finance.
Oh, I like this analogy.
Yeah, so think of your aerobic energy system, the one that processes oxygen to burn fats and carbohydrates at a nice sustainable rate as your primary checking account. It pays your steady daily expenses.
And ideally, you want to fund your entire race from that account if possible.
Right. But an ultramarathon never allows for a perfectly steady expenditure. I mean, you hit a massive, unexpected 30% grade climb, or you have to suddenly surge to beat a strict cutoff time at an aid station.
The checking account just doesn't have the liquidity to cover that kind of sudden, massive transaction.
Exactly. You need highly liquid cash, and you need it available instantaneously. That is your emergency fund. And in human biochemistry, that high liquidity emergency fund is creatine.
That financial analogy actually translates perfectly to the microscopic kinetics of the muscle cell. If we look at the ATP-PCR system, we're dealing with the foundational currency of biological work.
Right, ATP, adenosine triphosphate.
Yes. ATP provides the chemical energy for every single muscle contraction. When a muscle fiber contracts, an enzyme comes in and cleaves off one of the three phosphate groups from the ATP molecule.
And breaking that chemical bond is what releases the actual energy you need to move.
You got it. But that leaves behind adenosine diphosphate, or ADP. And ADP is essentially a depleted asset. It only has two phosphates now, so it can't yield mechanical energy until it gets rephosphorylated.
So how do we usually recharge that depleted asset?
Recharging that ADP usually requires routing it through your aerobic metabolism.
Okay.
So breaking down glycogen or oxidized fats, which is a highly efficient process, but it's relatively slow.
Right. So when you hit that steep technical climb I mentioned, your demand for energy is vastly outpacing the speed at which that oxygen-dependent metabolism can actually supply it.
Which forces the cell to tap the emergency fund, phosphocreatine.
The high liquidity cash.
Exactly. When you supplement with creatine, your muscle cells stored alongside a phosphate molecule. It basically acts as this highly volatile donor. The very second ATP drops a phosphate and becomes that useless ADP, the stored phosphocreatine instantly steps in.
Like instantaneously.
Fractions of a second. It donates its spare phosphate through an enzyme called creatine kinase, and it regenerates the ATP molecule immediately. There is absolutely no waiting for glucose breakdown, no waiting for oxygen delivery. It's an immediate, localized energy restoration.
Okay, I hear that, and it makes perfect sense for, say, a 100-meter sprinter executing a 10-second race. But I'm looking at this from the perspective of an endurance athlete, and I'm struggling to reconcile the necessity of that system for a prolonged submaximal effort.
Do you mean because ultra running is so slow?
Yeah, I mean, if your goal is just to survive a 100-mile race at a relatively slow, deliberate pace, your primary objective is staying deeply aerobic. Are you actually demanding enough of that immediate high liquidity energy to justify maximizing a biological pathway that's designed for explosive power?
It's a great question, but the data suggests you absolutely are. And this brings us to what the sources called the surge hypothesis.
The surge hypothesis. Okay, let's unpack that.
So we tend to view ultramarathons as these static, steady state efforts. But the reality of trail running is highly stochastic. The effort is constantly interrupted by severe microspikes in energy demand.
So surging isn't just like a tactical sprint to the finish line to beat the guy next to you.
Not at all. It is the sudden power output required just to navigate a slick, rocky ridgeline where every single footfall demands a massive burst of stabilizing torque. Or it's the anaerobic push to hike up a steep, muddy embankment.
Oh, right, because you're slipping and sliding around.
Exactly. Even if an ultra is 90% aerobic, that 10% that relies on anaerobic surges is what dictates whether your muscular system actually survives the race.
You know, the clinical trials in our source material actually isolate this exact phenomenon. There's an analysis from My Sport Science that highlights a study involving highly trained cyclists executing a 120-kilometer time trial.
And 120 kilometers is a definitively aerobic distance.
Right. But here's the kicker. The researchers embedded 1 kilometer and 4-kilometer sprints every 10 kilometers, specifically to mimic the breakaways or the steep hill climbs that are just inherent to a real-world race.
And the outcomes of that specific methodology are incredibly telling. The cyclists who underwent a creatine loading phase showed significantly elevated power outputs during the final sprints, the ones at the very end of the 120-kilometer ride.
Wow, so even after all that distance, they still had the emergency fund.
Exactly. Their baseline steady state time didn't statistically change overall, but their capacity to generate breakaway power when they were already deeply fatigued was preserved.
There's another study in here looking at triathletes that reinforces that exact finding, following just a 5-day loading phase of, I think it was 6 grams per day.
Yes, 6 grams a day.
Right. So the athletes completed 30 minutes of steady aerobic work, and that was followed immediately by high-intensity intervals. And the creatine group exhibited an 18% power improvement during those intervals.
18% is huge.
It is. And an 18% increase at the tail end of a workout implies that the rate limiting factor isn't leg strength, right? It's purely biochemical availability.
Yes, but the mechanism driving that 18% increase actually goes beyond just supplying rapid phosphates. It is fundamentally about buffering the cellular environment.
Okay, what do you mean by buffering?
Well, when you demand high power without sufficient phosphocreatine, your cells are forced into rapid anaerobic glycolysis to produce ATP. And a major byproduct of that specific pathway is the rapid accumulation of hydrogen ions.
And hydrogen ions make things acidic.
Exactly. These ions cause the intracellular pH to plummet. The muscle becomes highly acidic, and that acidity actually inhibits the very enzymes you need for further energy production.
So that's that sensation of burning, catastrophic fatigue you get on a steep hill.
Precisely. But elevated phosphocreatine delays this reliance on glycolysis. By regenerating ATP instantly, it dramatically reduces the accumulation of those hydrogen ions. It effectively stabilizes the pH of the muscle during those steep climbs.
Okay, so the cell has enough energy and the pH stability to surge uphill, but energy availability is really only half the equation of an ultra.
Right, because what goes up must come down.
Exactly. What happens to that exact same muscle cell when the mechanics shift from concentric pushing to the sheer force of eccentric braking on, say, a 3,000-foot descent? Because the literature heavily points to downhill running as the true physiological destroyer in these races.
It absolutely is. Downhill running entirely alters the biomechanical stress on the body. We're talking about severe eccentric muscle loading.
Okay, for anyone listening who isn't a kinesiologist, can you break down concentric versus eccentric?
Sure. During concentric movements, like when you're hiking uphill, the muscle fibers are physically shortening as they contract.
Like a bicep curl.
Right. But during eccentric movements, the muscle is forcibly lengthened while it is simultaneously attempting to contract.
So if we look at this through the lens of structural engineering, it's basically the difference between compressing a pillar versus subjecting a load-bearing cable to dynamic tensile stress.
That's a great way to visualize it. When you run down a mountain, gravity is accelerating your mass. Your quadriceps have to fire constantly to act as braking mechanisms, just preventing you from falling flat on your face.
Right.
So your muscles are actively trying to shorten to stop your momentum, but the angle of the descent is physically stretching them out at the exact same time.
That sounds violent at a microscopic level.
It is violent. That intense mechanical tug of war results in massive microtrauma at the cellular level. It's clinically referred to as exercise-induced muscle damage, or EIMD.
And what's actually getting damaged? Like what's tearing?
You are inducing physical tears in the sarcolemma, which is the delicate outer membrane encapsulating the muscle fiber.
Okay.
Once that membrane is compromised, the cell loses its ability to regulate its internal environment. And that sparks a severe, localized inflammatory cascade that very quickly becomes systemic.
To truly comprehend the violence of this eccentric trauma, we really have to look closely at this Frontiers in Physiology study that was provided in our sources. They tracked runners through the Brazil 135 ultramarathon.
Oh, this study is wild.
It is. And the environmental context here is crucial for the listener to understand. This race covers 217 kilometers through the Mantiqueira Mountains in Brazil. It features 12,200 meters of cumulative elevation change.
Which is just punishing.
Yeah. And the researchers drew blood from these athletes at multiple checkpoints baseline, 84 kilometers, 177 kilometers, and the finish line specifically to measure biomarkers of cellular destruction.
And the specific biomarkers they tracked were creatine kinase, or CK, lactate dehydrogenase, which is LDH, and aspartate aminotransferase, or AST.
And those are enzymes, right?
Yes, they are intracellular enzymes. Under normal, healthy conditions, they live inside the muscle cell to facilitate metabolism. They belong inside. So when you see massive concentrations of them floating around in the bloodstream, it indicates that the sarcolemma has been ruptured so violently that the internal contents of the muscle cells are literally spilling out into the systemic circulation.
Like a punctured oil pan on a car.
Exactly like that.
Well, the data they recorded at the 177 kilometer mark, which is roughly 44 hours into the race, it's just staggering. The levels of CK, LDH, and AST had multiplied by 4.6, 2.9, and 6.1 times their already highly elevated levels from the previous checkpoint.
The muscle breakdown is just exponential at that point.
But the metric that truly illustrates the shock to the body is C-reactive protein, CRP.
Yeah, CRP is a protein synthesized by the liver, and it is produced specifically in response to severe inflammation.
Okay, ready for this? In this study, the runners' CRP levels increased 243-fold from their pre-race baselines.
243-fold.
I had to read that number 3 times.
We really need to let the gravity of that number sink in for a moment, because a 243-fold increase in C-reactive protein is not indicative of a tough workout.
What is it indicative of?
That level of systemic inflammation mirrors the immune response you would expect to see in a patient suffering from clinical sepsis, or someone recovering from massive multi-system blunt force trauma in a car crash.
Wow.
The immune system is essentially operating under the assumption that the body is being destroyed because, well, it kind of is. So the biological imperative here is finding a way to protect that sarcolemma from rupturing in the first place.
Which is precisely where creatine's secondary mechanism of action comes into play. But I guess what I'm asking is, how does augmenting a metabolic energy pathway alter the physical tensile strength of the muscle membrane itself? Like, how does energy equal armor?
It's a brilliant question. And it comes down to osmoregulation and a concept called cell volumization.
Cell volumization.
Yes. Creatine is a highly osmotically active compound, meaning when you increase the intracellular concentration of creatine, it naturally draws water across the cell membrane and directly into the intracellular fluid.
That puffs the cell up.
Exactly. This increases the total volume of the cell.
So if we compare this to, say, the hydrostatic pressure found in botany, like turgor pressure in plants, a plant stem that lacks intracellular water is flaccid, right? It bends and snaps really easily under pressure.
Right, a wilted flower.
But a stem that is fully saturated with water has high turgor pressure. The water pushes out against the cell walls, rendering the entire structure incredibly rigid and resilient to mechanical stress.
That is the perfect analogy. The mechanism in skeletal muscle is remarkably similar. An optimally hydrated, volumized muscle cell exhibits much greater structural integrity. The stabilized sarcolemma is physically more resistant to the shearing forces of eccentric braking on the downhill.
So because the cell is plumped up with water, it doesn't tear as easily.
Consequently, less of the membrane tears and less of that creatine kinase leaks into your blood. But the most vital protective benefit is actually what it prevents from getting in.
Oh wait, something gets in when it tears.
Oh yes, when the sarcolemma tears, extracellular calcium rushes into the muscle cell, and a massive influx of calcium triggers the activation of calpains.
Calpains, what are those?
They are proteolytic enzymes. They effectively act as cellular shears. They run around breaking down the internal protein structures of the muscle.
Oh, that sounds terrible.
Yes. But by preventing the initial membrane rupture with that extra water volume, creatine stops this secondary catastrophic wave of calcium-induced protein degradation.
You know, this molecular protection maps perfectly onto the field journals in our sources. There's this anecdotal report from Field Athlete where an endurance runner was documenting the specific muting of what he called old man DOMS.
Delayed onset muscle soreness.
Yeah. Following these severely eccentric downhill long runs in training, the athlete noted a dramatic reduction in that muscular heavy-leggedness and immobility in the days following the effort.
Which is a huge deal for a runner.
It's everything. If you are training for a 100-miler, the limitation in your training block usually isn't cardiovascular fitness. It's the mechanical breakdown of your legs.
Right. You just can't physically run anymore.
Exactly. If your baseline muscle damage is reduced by 10 or 15% after a massive weekend long run, you aren't just surviving your midweek speed sessions, you are actually absorbing the training load. And over a 6-month macro cycle, that enhanced recovery compounds exponentially.
Absolutely. So we've established that creatine arms the muscle with both the bioenergetic capacity to surge uphill and the structural resilience to break downhill.
The ultimate mountain combo.
Yeah, but we have to talk about fuel, because the governing limitation for any effort lasting longer than 3 hours remains exogenous fueling. The primary obsession of any endurance athlete is glycogen management.
Right, because glycogen depletion results in the abrupt cessation of high output performance. You hit the wall, and then it forces your body to rely on lipid oxidation, burning fat, which is vastly slower and demands more oxygen.
Which introduces a critical variable. If you are volumizing the cell and altering its osmotic balance with all this extra water, how does that impact the muscle's ability to uptake and store carbohydrates during those 20 hours on the trail?
Let me guess. It helps.
Far from hindering it. Creatine supplementation exerts a highly synergistic effect on carbohydrate metabolism.
Wow.
The literature indicates a robust glycogen-sparing effect during exercise, but the truly compelling data revolves around accelerated glycogen replenishment post-exercise or during continuous fueling.
Tell me about the clinical trial.
Okay, so a clinical trial paired a high carbohydrate diet with 20 grams of creatine per day following exhausting exercise. And within a 24-hour window, the cohort consuming creatine alongside their carbohydrates restocked their intramuscular glycogen stores at a significantly accelerated rate compared to the cohort consuming carbohydrates alone.
So the volumized cell is actually vacuuming up glucose more aggressively.
Exactly.
But what is the signaling pathway there? Why does the cell alter its uptake speed just because it has more water inside of it?
It's fascinating. The physical swelling of the cell serves as a potent anabolic signal. The cell physically senses the increased osmotic pressure and interprets it as a state of growth and storage.
It thinks it's time to build.
Right. This mechanotransduction triggers a kinase signaling cascade, likely involving AMPK, which directly upregulates the translocation of GLUT4 receptors.
Okay, and GLUT4, those are the specific transport proteins that migrate to the surface of the cell to pull circulating blood glucose inside, right?
Correct. The intracellular swelling effectively forces more of these glucose transporters to the cell membrane. Furthermore, taking creatine alongside carbohydrates has been shown to stimulate a higher localized sensitivity to insulin.
And insulin is basically the key that unlocks those GLUT4 transporters.
Exactly. The net result is a highly sensitized muscle cell that captures circulating blood glucose and synthesizes it into stored glycogen with remarkable efficiency.
Okay, see, this mechanism completely dismantles one of the most pervasive myths in endurance sport.
Oh, the cramping myth.
Yes. If you walk into literally any high school track locker room or read older running forums, the absolute gospel passed down for decades is that creatine causes severe dehydration and muscle cramping.
It's everywhere.
The logic seemed to be that if creatine is pulling water into the muscle, it must be sucking the bloodstream dry, leaving you vulnerable to systemic dehydration.
It is a profound misunderstanding of human fluid compartments.
Unpack that for us.
Sure. The body's total water is basically divided into intracellular fluid, which is water inside the cells, and extracellular fluid, which includes your blood plasma. The outdated assumption was a zero-sum game. If water goes into the muscle, it must leave the plasma.
Causing hypovolemia, low blood volume.
Right. But the sources clarified that this is not a redistribution of existing water. It's an expansion of total body water.
Ah, so you're just holding more water overall.
Precisely the opposite of the myth. Creatine increases intracellular water, but you ingest this creatine with fluids over days or weeks. The body simply retains slightly more water globally, storing the excess directly inside the muscle tissue where the metabolic heat is actually generated.
So the plasma volume doesn't drop at all.
The plasma volume remains entirely stable, or in some specific cases, slightly expanded.
The clinical trials observing athletes exercising in extreme heat provide the definitive proof here. We are looking at studies conducted in environmental chambers set between 33.5 and 35 degrees Celsius.
Which is well over 90 degrees Fahrenheit.
Right. It's brutal. And the subjects who underwent creatine loading did not cramp at all. Instead, they exhibited lower resting and exercising heart rates, reduced core body temperatures, and a significantly delayed onset of heat-induced fatigue compared to the placebo groups.
And the hemodynamics explain the performance benefit perfectly. Because their plasma volume was maintained, their cardiovascular system did not have to strain to pump thickened, dehydrated blood to the skin to dissipate heat.
Which means the heart's stroke volume remains efficient.
Exactly. The internal cellular reservoir of water effectively acted as an expanded thermal buffer. It absorbed the metabolic heat generated by the working muscles. Across comprehensive meta-analyses spanning decades of data, there is absolutely zero empirical evidence linking creatine to an increased incidence of exercise-induced cramping.
So the cellular hyperhydration actually serves as a protective mechanism against cramping.
Yes, it protects you from the very thing people thought it caused.
That is just, it's mind-blowing how wrong the locker room lore was.
But, okay, we've optimized the muscle's fuel, its structural integrity, and its thermal regulation.
The physical body is ready.
But there is a central governor that usually forces an athlete to quit long before the localized muscle tissue actually reaches catastrophic failure.
The central nervous system.
Yes, the cognitive toll of navigating a highly technical trail at 2 a.m. after being awake for 20 hours, trying to calculate your nutrition and fighting off literal visual hallucinations, it is immense.
The bioenergetics of the human brain are incredibly demanding. I mean, despite accounting for roughly just 2% of total body mass, the brain consumes upwards of 20% of your daily energy expenditure.
It's a massive energy hog. It really is. And the neurons rely heavily on the exact same ATP and phosphocreatine systems we just discussed in the muscle to maintain their bioenergetic stability, especially when firing rapidly during complex cognitive tasks or under the stress of severe sleep deprivation.
So when an athlete is sleep deprived for a day and a night, running through the woods, what physically happens to the energy availability in their brain?
Well, sleep is the period when cerebral energy stores are largely restored. When you remain awake and highly active for 24 hours straight, the continuous neuronal firing completely depletes the brain's baseline levels of ATP and phosphocreatine.
So the brain is literally running out of batteries.
Exactly. The chemical energy required to maintain synaptic transmission just drops. And this localized energy crisis manifests as the classic symptoms of late-stage ultra running. Severe mental fog, degraded motor coordination, the inability to process basic pacing mathematics, and just the overwhelming emotional desire to abandon the race.
We actually pulled a fascinating thread from the ultra running community on Reddit into the source material for this. It features these athletes swapping tactical protocols for surviving the darkest moments of 100-mile and 200-mile races.
A real-world field note.
Yeah, and multiple runners detail this strategy of taking a massive single dose of creatine very late in the race, specifically at the onset of severe sleep deprivation. One runner noted that the cognitive clarity returned so rapidly it felt like an unfair advantage.
You know, field anecdotes often precede clinical validation. And in this case, the scientific report study perfectly mirrors that Reddit thread.
Oh, I love when the science backs up the trail bros. Tell us about the study.
So the researchers took a cohort of participants, kept them awake for 21 hours to simulate the sleep-deprived conditions of a 100-mile race, and then administered a single high acute dose of creatine.
And the dosing parameter here is critical, right? They didn't just use a standard 5-gram scoop.
No, not at all. They administered 0.35 grams per kilogram of body weight.
Okay, let's do the math on that. For a 70-kilogram runner, so roughly 154 pounds, that equals about 24.5 grams of creatine consumed in a single sitting.
Which is an exceptionally high acute dose. But the cognitive reversal was astounding. Using magnetic resonance spectroscopy, the researchers physically observed the subject's brains.
Real-time scanning.
Yes. And within just 3 hours of ingestion, the high dose had rapidly reversed the cognitive impairment induced by the 21 hours of wakefulness.
Just reversed it entirely.
Yeah. The cerebral ATP and phosphocreatine levels were not just sustained. The drop in brain pH was regulated. It was a complete rescue.
Wait, okay. I need to understand the necessity of that massive dosage. If 5 grams is sufficient to saturate the vast muscular network of my entire legs over a few weeks, why does the central nervous system demand an acute dose of 25 grams to achieve a cognitive rescue?
The disparity is dictated by the blood-brain barrier.
The BBB.
Right. The brain is encapsulated by a highly selective network of endothelial cells with extremely tight junctions. This barrier's primary evolutionary function is to prevent circulating solutes, toxins, and pathogens in the blood from non-selectively crossing into the central nervous system.
It's the ultimate bouncer at the club.
Exactly. Under normal, rested conditions, the brain actually synthesizes its own creatine internally. And the specific creatine transporters on the blood-brain barrier, they're known as SLC6A8 transporters, they are highly resistant to pulling exogenous creatine from the bloodstream.
Oh, so the brain aggressively guards its internal chemical environment. It doesn't want outside creatine.
Exactly. However, the dynamics shift radically under severe metabolic stress. When you are sleep deprived for 24 hours, the brain's internal synthesis simply cannot keep up with the energetic demand.
It's failing.
Right. So by introducing a massive 25-gram dose into your gastrointestinal tract, you create an overwhelming concentration gradient of creatine in the blood plasma.
It's just flooding the system.
Yes. This immense osmotic pressure, combined with the brain's desperate, localized signaling for energy substrates, effectively forces the creatine through those tight junctions. It rapidly stabilizes the cerebral environment and preserves working memory and processing speed.
That is wild. The study involving elite rugby players operating under sleep deprivation really illustrates the real-world application of this mechanism beautifully.
It does. The researchers subjected these rugby players to sleep deprivation and then required them to execute highly complex reactive passing skill tests.
And as anticipated, the lack of sleep degraded their motor coordination and decision-making, right?
Their passing accuracy absolutely plummeted. However, upon receiving acute high dose of creatine, that specific reduction in complex skill execution was completely abolished.
And abolished.
Yes, their central nervous systems performed as if they were fully rested.
If you are an athlete targeting these extreme distances, this data fundamentally alters your tactical approach. I mean, while chronic daily low-dose supplementation will slowly elevate your baseline cerebral stores over several months, this acute rescue protocol, literally dropping 20 to 25 grams into your flask at an aid station at mile 80, that represents a true emergency battery for your central nervous system when you are battling hallucinogenic levels of fatigue.
It is a remarkable neurological intervention. However, any objective scientific analysis requires us to confront the biological cost.
Right. There's always a catch.
If this compound amplifies uphill power, prevents the sarcolemma from tearing on descents, expands the thermal buffer, and actively rescues a failing brain, we have to ask why every single elite endurance athlete hasn't universally adopted it.
And the hesitation stems from a rigid physical reality, mass.
The weight-bearing dilemma. We established earlier that the mechanism of cell volumization draws water into the muscle, while that intracellular water carries physical mass.
Water is heavy.
On average, a loading protocol of creatine results in a total body mass increase of 1 to 2 kilograms, roughly 2.2 to 4.4 pounds. And it is vital to note this is entirely functional intracellular fluid, not adipose tissue.
It's not fat. But the physics of running do not differentiate between the mass of water and the mass of fat.
Exactly.
I mean, if you are a competitive swimmer or a track cyclist, your mass is supported by the buoyancy of the water or the frame of the bicycle. The addition of 2 kilograms is a totally negligible variable against the power output gains. But a runner must physically lift that extra mass off the ground against the force of gravity thousands upon thousands of times over the course of a race.
And this is the crux of the power weight trade-off. Running economy is defined as the oxygen cost required to maintain a given velocity.
Right.
A comprehensive meta-analysis of endurance performance demonstrated that for flat, steady-state running time trials, creatine supplementation actually yielded a slightly negative effect.
Interesting. So the bioenergetic benefits of the expanded phosphocreatine pool did not overcome the biomechanical oxygen cost of carrying an extra 1 to 2 kilograms of mass.
Precisely.
So if your singular objective is running a sub 3-hour marathon on a perfectly flat paved course like Chicago or Berlin, the extra mass is a mathematical liability. You aren't encountering unpredictable surges, and the eccentric load is uniform and manageable.
Correct. But the physics equation completely flips when you transition to a mountainous ultramarathon.
Because the terrain demands are so different.
Right. If you are racing the Hard Rock 100 or the UTMB in the Alps, you are facing 10,000 meters of vertical ascent and descent. The sheer muscular torque required to power up a 30% grade, combined with the catastrophic eccentric trauma that descends, fundamentally changes the demands of the sport.
So in the mountains, the structural preservation of the sarcolemma and the enhanced power output on the climbs vastly outweigh the metabolic penalty of carrying an extra kilogram of fluid.
It's not even a close contest. The benefits heavily outweigh the cost on a mountain.
Okay, while the mass trade-off requires a tactical decision from the athlete, I want to address a much more severe physiological concern. Let's return to the Brazil 135 study for a second.
Sure.
The researchers documented that by the 84-kilometer mark, a significant portion of the athlete hit the clinical diagnostic criteria for acute kidney injury.
Yes, they did.
And anyone who has ever researched creatine online has encountered the pervasive medical rumor that it destroys renal function. When studies show ultramarathoners suffering kidney injury and we know they are metabolizing creatine, I'm struggling to reconcile this. If my kidneys use creatinine levels to signal organ failure, how can we be absolutely sure that flooding the body with a supplement that artificially spikes that exact same biomarker isn't masking actual acute damage during a 100-mile race?
It is a vital, critical question, and it requires us to cleanly separate the pharmacology of the supplement from the trauma of the sport itself.
Okay, separate them for me.
The creatine destroys kidneys narrative is a classic example of misinterpreting a proxy biomarker. We have decades of longitudinal data confirming that in healthy individuals, creatine supplementation exerts no nephrotoxic effects. The systemic medical panic originates from a profound misunderstanding of creatinine with an N.
Right, the metabolic byproduct.
Yes. Intramuscular creatine undergoes a continuous non-enzymatic degradation. Roughly 1% to 2% of your body's creatine pool spontaneously breaks down every single day into creatinine.
And then what happens to it?
This waste product is released into the bloodstream, travels to the kidneys, and is filtered through the glomerulus into the urine. In standard medical pathology, physicians measure blood creatinine to estimate your glomerular filtration rate, or GFR.
Which is how well your kidneys are filtering.
Exactly. If your kidneys are failing and cannot filter the blood effectively, creatinine accumulates in the serum. Thus, high creatinine is the universal red flag for kidney disease.
Ah, I see. So if I am artificially saturating my muscle cells with massive quantities of exogenous creatine, that 1% to 2% daily degradation yields a significantly higher volume of exhaust fumes, so to speak.
Precisely. You are artificially spiking the exact biomarker the medical community uses to diagnose failure. It is a biochemical false flag.
That makes so much sense.
Your blood creatinine levels rise simply because the substrate volume has increased, not because the renal filtration rate has actually declined. Provided other more specific markers of kidney function like blood urea nitrogen or cystatin C remain within normal ranges, high creatinine in a supplemented athlete is entirely benign.
But wait, that still leaves the Brazil 135 runners. Their GFR actually dropped. They hit the clinical criteria for real acute kidney injury. If it wasn't the false flag of the supplement, what caused the actual organ damage?
The injury was induced by the compounding extremes of the ultramarathon environment itself.
Yeah.
Severe hypovolemia combined with massive rhabdomyolysis.
Okay, translate that for us.
When athletes run 135 miles over mountainous terrain, the fluid loss through sweat is colossal. In this specific study, runners lost up to 10% of their total body mass in fluid alone.
Which is incredibly dangerous.
It is. When you are operating in a state of severe dehydration, your blood plasma volume plummets. This triggers hypovolemia, drastically reducing renal perfusion, the actual physical blood flow to the kidneys.
The organs are effectively being starved of circulation.
Yes. And while the kidneys are drying out from lack of blood flow, they're simultaneously being hammered by the proteins leaking from the torn muscle cells we discussed earlier.
Right, the eccentric downhill trauma.
Exactly. The severe eccentric trauma rips the sarcolemma, releasing not just creatine kinase, but massive amounts of myoglobin into the bloodstream. Myoglobin is a very large, complex protein.
And when those massive proteins hit the dehydrated kidneys...
When it reaches the kidneys, which are already compromised by low blood flow, the myoglobin physically clogs the renal tubules. It creates a toxic bottleneck that destroys the nephrons.
So the mountain, the dehydration, and the muscle trauma caused the acute kidney injury, not the creatine.
Exactly. If anything, by stabilizing the cell membrane and reducing myoglobin leakage in the first place, alongside expanding the total body water reservoir, creatine theoretically offers a slight protective buffer against this specific cascade.
Wow.
Though, to be fair, more targeted research is needed to definitively claim a nephroprotective effect. But the takeaway is unequivocal. The compound is completely safe for healthy kidneys, but the sport of ultra running is inherently dangerous to them.
Okay, having untangled the biochemistry of the energy systems, the structural protection, the neurological rescue, and the physiological costs, we have to look at how an endurance athlete actually practically implements this into a training block.
The dosing strategy.
Right. Because the legacy protocol, designed primarily for bodybuilders, revolves around a massive loading phase.
Yeah, the traditional pharmacokinetics dictate consuming 20 grams per day, typically divided into 4 5-gram doses for a period of 5 to 7 days.
To rapidly saturate the muscles.
Exactly. Following saturation, the athlete drops to a daily maintenance dose of 3 to 5 grams just to replenish the daily degradation we just discussed.
But if an ultra runner is highly sensitive to suddenly gaining 3 or 4 pounds of intracellular water in a single week, which, as we established, dramatically alters the running biomechanics and joint loading, is that rapid saturation phase biologically necessary?
It is absolutely not necessary. And for weight-bearing endurance athletes, it is rarely recommended.
So what should they do instead?
You can entirely bypass the loading phase and immediately begin the maintenance dose of 3 to 5 grams daily. The biochemical endpoint is identical. It simply requires roughly 28 days to achieve full muscular saturation rather than 7 days.
Slow and steady.
Right. The gradual accumulation of intracellular water allows the athlete's connective tissues and running economy to adapt smoothly to the slight increase in mass.
It is also critical to analyze how individual biology dictates the efficacy of the supplement too, because the baseline data indicates that the physiological response is far from uniform across different demographics. If we look at athletes adhering to plant-based diets, the baseline context shifts entirely.
Yes, profoundly. Creatine is synthesized internally by the liver and kidneys, but a significant portion of the human supply is derived exogenously from consuming skeletal muscles, specifically meat and seafood.
So vegetarians and vegans consume virtually zero dietary creatine.
Consequently, their baseline intramuscular creatine stores are naturally functioning at a significant deficit compared to omnivores.
Their internal high liquidity emergency fund is chronically underfunded.
Precisely. Because their baseline is so suppressed, when a plant-based athlete begins supplementation, they experience the most profound, dramatic delta in performance.
Because they have so much more room to grow.
Right. The relative enhancements in their anaerobic power output, recovery kinetics, and particularly their cognitive resilience are statistically much larger simply because they had a much deeper physiological void to fill.
The literature also points to complex endocrinological interactions for female athletes. The physiological demands and metabolic efficiencies fluctuate heavily across the menstrual cycle.
The intersection of female endocrinology and creatine kinetics is a rapidly expanding field of study. Estrogen naturally influences the endogenous synthesis of creatine and the activity of creatine kinase.
And during the luteal phase.
During the luteal phase, when estrogen and progesterone levels shift and core body temperature naturally rises, women often experience a higher baseline of cardiovascular strain and fatigue. Supplementation has been shown to stabilize cellular bioenergetics across these hormonal fluctuations, mitigating the fatigue dips and helping female athletes maintain consistent power output and recovery regardless of their cycle phase.
That's incredibly powerful. And as we look at the demographics of ultra running in general, a massive percentage of the elite and competitive field are masters athletes, runners well into their 40s, 50s, and beyond.
Yes, the masters endurance crowd is huge.
For an aging athlete, the biological battle shifts from just building fitness to actively fighting off structural decay.
For the masters athlete, creatine transitions from just a performance enhancer to a fundamental longevity tool.
How so?
The aging process triggers sarcopenia, which is the involuntary loss of skeletal muscle mass power, and specifically the atrophy of the fast-twitch type 2 muscle fibers. Furthermore, aging decreases bone mineral density.
So you're losing muscle and bone.
Right. But a comprehensive review of literature focusing on adults over 50 demonstrated that continuous creatine supplementation, particularly when paired with resistance training, significantly combats this decay.
It actually fights sarcopenia.
It does. It stimulates osteoblast activity for bone health, and it provides the energetic capacity required to preserve those critical fast twitch fibers, allowing the older athlete to maintain their dynamic power and durability on the trail.
That is fantastic. But if you are listening and integrating this into your protocol, the golden rule of endurance sports applies. Absolutely nothing new on race day.
Never on race day.
The gastrointestinal reality is that creatine is an osmotically active compound. If you attempt that massive 25-gram cognitive rescue dose at mile 80 without having tested your gut's tolerance during a massive training run, well, the osmotic load can draw a massive influx of water directly into your intestines,
resulting in severe cramping and catastrophic diarrhea, which will end your race faster than any muscle fatigue.
Exactly. So the gastrointestinal distress is a very real concentration-dependent risk.
Ensuring the powder is completely dissolved in a large volume of water and testing the acute dosing strategy during peak training blocks is absolutely mandatory.
Ultimately, the data presents creatine not as an artificial shortcut, but as a catalyst for marginal gains. I mean, it will not run the miles for you.
You still have to do the work.
Right. But if stabilizing your cell membranes reduces your post-run tissue damage by 10%, that translates to 10% more high-quality training volume you can absorb over a season without injury. That is how marginal gains compound into massive breakthroughs.
It alters the baseline of what the human machine can actually endure. I mean, we have tracked this compound from the explosive anaerobic environment in the gym to the prolonged multi-system trauma of the mountains.
It's been a journey.
We've examined how it regenerates ATP for steep surges, how it utilizes turgor pressure to protect the sarcolemma from eccentric tearing, how it accelerates GLUT4 translocation to restock glycogen, and how it actively expands the thermal buffer without dehydrating the plasma volume.
And it does all of this while remaining completely safe for healthy kidneys, provided you survive the inherent dehydration of the mountain itself.
Exactly. But before we conclude, the data regarding the blood-brain barrier and sleep deprivation introduces a concept that extends far beyond sports.
Oh, absolutely.
We discussed how a massive 25-gram acute dose creates a concentration gradient powerful enough to cross the blood-brain barrier, rapidly restoring cerebral ATP and rescuing the cognitive function of a runner who has been awake for 24 hours.
It effectively reboots the failing central nervous system.
Now, remove the athlete from the equation entirely and apply that exact same localized energetic failure to occupational health.
Like shift workers.
Think about an emergency room physician entering the 23rd hour of a grueling trauma shift, where a fractional delay in working memory or processing speed can literally cost a patient their life.
Oh, wow.
Or consider a crew of wildland firefighters digging a trench line on their second consecutive night without sleep, operating heavy machinery in a high-risk environment.
That's a completely different level of stakes.
It is. If an acute dose of this white powder can rapidly abolish the cognitive deficits caused by severe sleep deprivation in an ultramarathon, we're looking at an intervention that transcends sports nutrition.
You're saying it could be utilized systemically.
Could this compound eventually become a mandated neuroprotective protocol for high-stakes, sleep-deprived professions where cognitive failure means life or death?
Man, that fundamentally redefines the limitations of human endurance, both in and out of sport. It's definitely something to analyze deeply on your next long run. Thank you to everyone for joining us on this deep dive. Keep critically evaluating the science behind your training, leave the legacy myths behind, and we will catch you next time.
Wow, AI is so powerful. Lots to be learned there. I did want to update you with what I've been taking on the trail. And it's not meant to replace anything you're doing. You know, everybody has their unique microbiome, and whatever you've been training with, you know, maybe you should keep training with it. This is more of just an idea that's worked for me. I've been doing Shakeology. So I get a bag. I mix Shakeology with collagen peptides, just a half of a tablespoon. Then get ground turmeric and use 1/8 of a teaspoon. Then you need to take turmeric with black pepper. It helps it absorb better, right? So same, you know, 1/8 of a teaspoon. And then your sea salt, right? Last week I did 1,000 milligrams. And this week or yesterday, and it was it was like 90 degrees, so it helped. I probably should have drank more water. Definitely wasn't prepared for that hot weather for sure, but it did help. So, right, 1/4 teaspoon is 500 grams or 590. Just did a half of teaspoon, which is like 11 milligrams of sodium, right? In each bag, I took the bag every 2 hours. And then on top of that, put a charred cherry in it. And then 1 gram of creatine. But you know, the more I think about this recipe, I'm always thinking, well, instead of the Shakeology, maybe I need to find some kind of shake that has fat in it, because your main sources for running is going to be fat and carbohydrates, not protein. You probably should have little protein. So, you know, it's always a work in progress, you know, so it's not the best thing out there, and it's always being tweaked. But that's probably what I'm going to do for the race. Oh, and I put a half or a 1/8 or 1/16 of teaspoon of ginger. And you might be thinking, well, that tastes nasty. Well, luckily, I guess the Shakeology of chocolate flavor was able to overpower all that, so you don't even taste it, which is great. Probably because maybe you don't have enough, but my gut seemed to do good on running for 7 hours, so that was good. And taking all that was good. I did feel really bad at the end, which I'm always hoping to feel incredible, like I can keep going and that I don't need to stop. But unfortunately, at the end of my run, I did feel like really bad and felt tired, and so yeah, I'm always hoping that I won't feel tired, but I did feel tired, and I always like, I gotta do this again. So, and you know, really that's what it is, you know, you have to do it again. It's like you run a marathon, but then you have to go run another marathon, and then you have to run 10 more miles on top of that. So that's what like 100K is. So it is pretty tough. It is pretty tough. But you know, you take it 1 mile at a time, and don't be afraid to walk for a little bit if you having some gut problems and you're trying to sort some things out. That can always be an option. But yeah, maybe I do something different in the next season, with finding some kind of fat protein shake, which a lot of the protein shakes out there have minimal fat, or at least the ones that I've always looked for. So I think it is going to be something hard to find, but definitely gonna search for that. Just thinking about it, that might be a good option. And then on top of that, I took some gummies with some so I take the Shakeology and all those other things in the bag, and then the next hour I take some gummies, and I guess I take the pecans, because they have 20 grams of fat per half or 1/4 cup. So they're kind of like the fattest foods, like nuts. You could go with macadamia nuts. They got 20 grams per 1/4 of a cup. But I don't like the taste of macadamia nuts, so that's why I go with the pecans. You can go with walnuts or a different type of nut, but if you do that, the fat content goes down to like 15 grams to like 13 grams. Somewhere around there. So if you're trying to get 1% better, then that's why I kind of go with the other ones. But those ones still taste good. I guess you could just eat more to get the same level of fat. So, but yeah, so I take that, and then I take the nuts with the gummies. But I think I definitely have to come up with some new options, because that was kind of getting old. At hour 6, I definitely probably wanted something different. But I think the great thing about once you're in the race, the aid stations always have some different foods to eat, which is nice. Different from your training, because you kind of pre-pack when you go out in your training. You don't have all these options sometimes. So that's always nice. Something to look forward to is the race. So, but hopefully this podcast was helpful for you, and hopefully you learned something today about creatine. And hopefully you can apply it to your a supplement to your training load, and hopefully it can help you recover quickly. And I always appreciate you tuning in, and thank you for listening. Remember, you can always hire me as your running coach. If you have heart disease and you're listening to this, I've been there before, so I can help you whichever race you want to race, whether that is an ultra or if you just looking to get started running. We can start from anywhere, and I can help you succeed. So I'll leave my email in the podcast, and you can look that up. Remember to like and subscribe, and then you'd be able to get the latest podcasts to download. And if there is anything that you are interested in learning about, remember, just email me, and I can look into it and do an episode for that product with AI, and research it a little bit for you. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you on the next episode.